Kyle pressed his thin fingers against the cool surface of his communication console. The blue glow from the screen made his translucent skin look even paler than usual. Outside the crystal windows of the communication center, the 3 moons of Velthara Prime cast gentle light across the peaceful farming valleys below. The young Cytherian had worked the night shift for 2 years now. His job was simple: monitor the space channels for incoming messages and weather reports. Nothing exciting ever happened on Velthara Prime. The most dangerous thing they faced was the occasional dust storm during harvest season. His large, dark eyes scanned the displays showing normal traffic. Cargo ships bringing supplies from other worlds. Tourist vessels carrying visitors who wanted to see their famous crystal cities. Everything was quiet and normal, just like every other night. Then the sensors screamed. Kale jumped back from his console as red warning lights filled the room. The peaceful hum of the communication center turned into chaos as alarms blared from every speaker. His hands shook as he tried to understand what the instruments were telling him. Ships, hundreds of them, coming out of quantum space at the edge of their system. But these were not the gentle, rounded vessels that usually visited Velthara Prime. These ships looked like weapons. Dark metal hulls covered in sharp points and gun barrels. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of insects hunting for food. Kyle's breathing came fast and shallow. His species had not seen war for over 1,000 years. They had heard stories about the violent races that lived in other parts of the galaxy, but those seemed like old myths. Not real. Not here. He activated the emergency channel that connected him directly to the Colony Council. Elder Nira's calm face appeared on his screen. Even in the middle of the night, she looked peaceful and wise. "Kale, child, why do you call at this hour?" she asked gently. "Elder Nira." Kale's voice cracked as he spoke. "There are ships. Many ships. They don't look friendly." Nira's expression changed. The peaceful look in her eyes turned to concern. "Show me." Kyle sent her the sensor data. He watched her face grow pale as she studied the information. The ships were big, much bigger than anything in their small defense fleet. And there were so many of them. "Wake the Council," Nira said quietly, "and send a message to the Galactic Confederation. Tell them we need help." The connection ended. Kale sat alone in the red glow of the warning lights, his hands trembling as he composed the message. He had never written a distress call before. How do you ask for help when you don't even know how to fight? Within an hour, the council had gathered in their crystal chamber. Administrator Voss paced back and forth, his usually calm demeanor cracking under stress. The other council members sat in their curved chairs, their translucent faces showing fear. "Our defense ships are meant for asteroid mining," Voss said, his voice tight. "We have no weapons that could stop an invasion fleet." "Perhaps they come in peace," suggested one of the younger council members. "Maybe they are just passing through our system." The hope in his voice died as new reports came in. The unknown fleet had split into groups. Some ships moved toward the planet while others took positions around their space stations. This was not a peaceful visit. "The communication array is picking up strange signals," reported another council member. "The language is unlike anything in our databases." Elder Nira stood slowly. Her age showed in the careful way she moved, but her voice remained strong. "Send the distress call to every world in the Confederation. Someone must help us." Kale worked frantically at his console, broadcasting their plea across all known communication channels. The message was simple but desperate. "This is Velthara Prime. Unknown hostile fleet has entered our system. We are a peaceful colony with no military capability. Please, anyone who receives this message, we need immediate assistance." The responses came quickly, and they all said the same thing. The Altarian Republic was sorry, but their fleet was too far away to help in time. The Centauri Alliance sent their thoughts and prayers but could not risk their ships against an unknown enemy. The Trade Federation expressed deep concern but had no military vessels available. One by one, every major power in the galaxy found a reason not to help. They were too far away, too busy, too scared, or simply didn't care about one small farming world. Kyle felt despair growing in his chest as each rejection came in. His people were known for their ability to sense emotions, and right now he could feel the fear of every Cytherian on the planet. They were alone. Then something strange happened. As Kyle prepared to shut down the communication array, one more signal came in. It was weak and distant, from a small blue world on the edge of known space, a world that most of the galaxy avoided. a world they called a death world because it was too dangerous for normal life. Earth muck. Lieutenant Daeho Kim sat in the Seoul Deep Space Communications Array, drinking his third cup of coffee of the night. Earth's monitoring station picked up messages from across the galaxy, but most were routine trade communications or scientific data, nothing that required immediate action. But this message was different. Daeho read it 3 times before he fully understood what he was seeing. An entire world was asking for help. A peaceful species was about to be destroyed by an unknown enemy. He looked at the message header. Every major power in the galaxy had already refused to help. The desperate signal was now reaching the outer systems, the forgotten worlds that the Confederation barely acknowledged. Daeho had been in the military for 10 years. He had seen what humans could do when they decided to fight. The galaxy called them Deathworlders because they came from a planet so violent that they had to become warriors just to survive. Most alien species were afraid of humans. They thought humans were too aggressive, too willing to fight, too dangerous to be trusted. Maybe that was exactly what this situation needed. He forwarded the message to Fleet Command with a priority flag. Within minutes, his screen showed an incoming call from Admiral Bora Choi herself. The Admiral's face was hard and serious, the face of someone who had made difficult decisions for many years. "Kim, I see you flagged this alien distress call," she said without preamble. "What's your assessment?" "Ma'am, it looks like a peaceful colony is about to be destroyed. Everyone else in the galaxy has refused to help them." Admiral Choi studied the message data for several long moments. "How long would it take to get a fleet to their location?" "Approximately 18 hours at maximum quantum speed, ma'am." "And their attackers?" "Unknown, but sensors suggest heavy warships. Possibly raiders or slavers." The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Daeho could see her thinking, weighing the risks and benefits. Earth was still new to galactic politics. Getting involved in alien conflicts could make enemies, but it could also show the galaxy what humans were capable of when they chose to protect the innocent. "I'll convene the Defense Council," Admiral Choi said finally. "But Kim, if we do this, it won't be a peaceful rescue mission. Whoever these attackers are, they're about to learn why the rest of the galaxy calls us Deathworlders." The connection ended. Daeho sat back in his chair and looked at the star charts showing the location of Velthara Prime. Somewhere out there, peaceful aliens were counting down their last hours, hoping someone would care enough to help them. They had no idea that their desperate message had reached the one species in the galaxy that specialized in impossible rescues. The one species that had never learned how to back down from a fight, especially when the innocent needed protection. Earth was coming to war. Captain Woo Jin Park stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Incheon's Fury, watching the quantum space readings count down to 0. Around him, his crew worked with the calm efficiency that came from years of training. The ship hummed with power as its massive engines prepared to drop them back into normal space. 30 seconds to emergence, called out Lieutenant Seo Jun Han from the tactical station. "All weapon systems are ready. Marines are standing by." Park nodded, his eyes fixed on the main screen. The Terran Expeditionary Fleet had made the journey to Velthara Prime in record time. 37 ships total, dreadnoughts, cruisers, destroyers, and carrier vessels loaded with fighters. Not the largest fleet Earth had ever assembled, but every ship carried weapons designed by a species that had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill efficiently. "Sir," Ensign Jiwoo Kang spoke up from the communications station. "We're still receiving distress signals from the surface. The aliens. They sound terrified." Park had heard the recordings. The Catherians spoke in musical voices that trembled with fear as they described the attacks on their settlements. These were people who had never known war, never understood violence. They were like children caught in a storm they couldn't comprehend. 10 seconds, Han announced. "All ships prepare for combat emergence," Park ordered into his communicator. "Remember, we don't know what we're facing yet. Stay alert and follow the plan." The countdown reached 0. Space twisted around them as the fleet dropped out of quantum drive. The peaceful blackness of space was immediately replaced by a scene of destruction that made even veteran soldiers pause in shock. Velthara Prime hung before them like a wounded jewel. The planet's crystal cities, which should have sparkled in the light of their sun, now burned with the orange glow of fires. Orbital stations drifted in pieces, their broken hulls venting atmosphere into space. Streams of small ships fled from the planet's surface, overloaded with refugees. And everywhere, like parasites feeding on a dying animal, were the Korthak ships. "Dear God," whispered someone on the bridge. The alien vessels were nightmares made real. Dark chitin hulls curved like insect shells, bristling with weapons that looked more like claws and stingers than proper guns. They moved in coordinated swarms, attacking the fleeing refugee ships with casual cruelty. "Sensor analysis," Park ordered, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. 143 hostile vessels, Han reported. Configuration unknown, but they're definitely armed. Energy signatures suggest they're more advanced than standard Confederation technology. "And they just fired on a refugee ship," added Kang, her voice tight with anger. Park watched a small civilian vessel die in a burst of green energy. Hundreds of innocent aliens dead in an instant. The Korthak ships didn't even pause before moving on to the next target. "All ships, this is Admiral Choi," came the voice of the fleet commander over the communication system. "We are now in a combat zone. Rules of engagement are simple. Any ship that fires on civilians is a legitimate target. Show these insects what happens when they threaten the innocent." "Sir," Han said, "the enemy fleet is moving to intercept us. They're not trying to run." Park almost smiled. The Korthak had probably never faced serious resistance before. They were used to easy targets, peaceful species that surrendered rather than fight. They had no idea what was coming for them. "Launch all fighters," Park ordered, "and signal the marine transports. Tell Commander Lee to prepare her boarding teams." The Inchin's fury shuddered as its fighter bays opened and dozens of small craft poured out. Human fighters were ugly compared to the elegant ships of other species. But they were built for one purpose: to survive in combat long enough to destroy their enemies. The first Korthak ships reached weapons range and opened fire. Green energy beams lanced across space, striking the human fleet. Park felt his ship shake as the shields absorbed the impact. "Return fire," he ordered calmly. The human response was immediate and devastating. Particle cannons, railguns, and missile launchers erupted in coordinated fury. The Korthak had expected their enemies to fall back, to be overwhelmed by superior numbers. Instead, the human ships charged forward, their weapons blazing. The first alien ship to die had been advancing confidently toward the human line. A full spread of human missiles struck it amidships, and the insectoid vessel simply came apart. Its chitin hull cracked like an eggshell, spilling atmosphere and crew into the void. "Enemy vessel destroyed," Han reported with satisfaction. But the Korthak were not helpless. Their ships were individually powerful, and they had the advantage of numbers. Green energy beams found gaps in human shields, and Park watched one of their destroyers take heavy damage. "Sir, the Daegu defender is requesting assistance," Kang called out. "Negative," Park replied. "Tell them to fall back and make repairs." "Han, target that Korthak cruiser," the big one with the spiral shell. The battle raged across the Velthara system. Human ships darted between the larger alien vessels, using their superior speed and maneuverability to avoid the worst of the enemy fire. Meanwhile, human fighters swarmed around Korthak ships like angry wasps, striking at weak points and then disappearing before return fire could find them. Lieutenant Yoo-Jin Kim led Red Squadron through a maze of enemy ships, her fighter dancing between energy beams that would have vaporized her craft. "This is Red Leader," she called over the combat channel. "I count at least 20 refugee ships still trying to escape. We need to clear them a path." "Copy that, Red Leader," came the voice of Commander So-Young Lee from her marine transport. "My people are itching for a fight. Find us a Korthak ship to board." Park smiled grimly as he listened to the chatter on the combat channels. This was what humans did best. Other species had better technology, more elegant ships, more advanced weapons. But no one in the galaxy could match human aggression and adaptability in combat. A Korthak battleship, larger than anything in the human fleet, turned its attention to the Inchin's fury. The alien vessel's weapons charged with a sound like screaming metal. "Preparing to fire. Evasive maneuvers," Park ordered. "All power to forward shields." The ship lurched as his pilot threw them into a diving turn that would have killed most alien crews from the acceleration alone. The Korthak's main gun fired, missing them by mere meters. The energy beam continued on to strike an asteroid, turning the rock into glowing vapor. "Close to ramming distance," Park ordered. "I want to see the fear in their compound eyes." "Sir?" Han looked confused. "Trust me, Lieutenant. These things are used to fighting from long range against helpless prey. They don't know how to handle an enemy that wants to get close." The Inchin's fury accelerated toward the Korthak battleship, its guns firing continuously. The alien vessel tried to turn away, but human ships were built for close combat. They closed the distance in seconds. "Launch boarding pods," Park ordered. Across the fleet, the same scene played out again and again. Human ships ignored the smart, safe tactics that other species used. Instead, they charged straight into close combat, where human training and human fury could make the difference. Commander Lee's Marines cut through the hull of a Korthak cruiser and poured into its corridors. The insectoid warriors were individually stronger than humans, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with such coordination and ruthless efficiency. "These bugs don't know how to handle surprises," Lee reported over the comm. "They keep trying to form up in neat lines. Makes them easy targets." On the surface of Velthara Prime, the situation was desperate. Kale huddled in the emergency shelter beneath the communications center, listening to the sounds of battle overhead. Korthak warriors had landed near the capital city, and their inhuman shrieks echoed through the crystal tunnels. "The humans," Elder Nira said softly. "They actually came." Through the shelter's windows, they could see flashes of light in the sky as the space battle raged. Sometimes a burning ship would streak across the sky like a falling star. Kale hoped they were Korthak ships, but he couldn't tell. "Will they be enough?" asked Administrator Voss. "There are so many of the enemy ships." Nira closed her eyes, using her empathic abilities to sense the emotions of the beings fighting above them. "The humans," she said quietly. "Their feelings are intense. They are not afraid. They are angry." Kyle didn't understand. How could anger help in a battle? His people avoided strong emotions because they were dangerous and painful. But the humans seemed to use their anger as a weapon. Above them, the space battle was reaching a turning point. The Korthak had expected to overwhelm the human fleet through sheer numbers. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to grow more dangerous as the battle continued. Human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting. Human fighters that should have retreated instead pressed their attacks, and human crews that should have surrendered instead found new ways to hurt their enemies. "Sir," Han called out, excitement in his voice. "Long-range sensors are detecting something. A lot of something. Coming in fast." Park checked his displays and felt a cold smile cross his face. "It looks like the main Korthak fleet has decided to join the party. Signal all ships. We're about to find out just how good we really are." The first battle was ending, but the real war was just beginning. The main Korthak fleet dropped out of quantum space like a plague of locusts. 215 ships of various sizes, from small scouts to massive hive ships that could carry entire armies. They emerged in perfect formation, their chitin hulls glinting in the light of Velthara's sun. Captain Park stood on his bridge, watching the sensor displays with grim satisfaction. His fleet was battered from the first engagement. 7 ships badly damaged, 2 destroyed completely, and every remaining vessel showing some kind of battle damage. Against impossible odds, they had saved most of the refugee ships and held the Korthak advance for 6 hours. Now the real enemy had arrived. "Signal all ships," Park ordered. "Implement Protocol Omega." Lieutenant Han looked up from his station with surprise. "Sir, are you sure? That protocol has never been tested in actual combat." "Today we test it," Park replied. "Tell the fleet to prepare for dispersal pattern Delta. We're going to show these insects what humans do when we're outnumbered." Protocol Omega was based on a simple human military principle. When you can't win through strength, you win through being unpredictable. Instead of fighting as a fleet, the human ships would scatter and fight as individuals. Each captain would use their own judgment, striking where the enemy was weak and disappearing before retaliation could find them. It was the kind of chaotic, undisciplined strategy that would horrify most military planners. But humans had been using it successfully for thousands of years. "All ships acknowledging orders," reported Ensign Kang. "Admiral, Choi sends her compliments and says to make them. Regret leaving their hive." The human fleet began to break apart, ships scattering in all directions. To the Korthak commanders, it must have looked like their enemies were running in panic. They had no way to understand that humans fought differently when they were desperate. Colonel Hyunwoo Shin led his special operations team aboard a modified stealth ship that looked like space debris. As the Korthak fleet advanced in their neat formations, his ship drifted silently between them, powered down and nearly invisible to sensors. "Target acquired," whispered his pilot. Korthak command ship dead ahead. Shin studied the massive vessel through their scope. It was 3 times the size of any human ship, covered in weapon emplacements and sensor arrays. The perfect target for a small team with big explosives. Remember, he told his team over the comm, we're not trying to destroy it. We just want to cut off their communications and make them panic. The stealth ship attached itself to the Korthak hull like a parasite. Shin's team cut through the alien metal with plasma torches, working quickly and quietly. Within minutes, they were inside the enemy vessel. The Korthak corridors were built for insectoid creatures twice the size of humans. Everything was too large, too angular, designed for beings that thought in straight lines and perfect hierarchies. Shin's team moved through the passages like ghosts, placing explosive charges on key systems. Meanwhile, across the system, other human ships were implementing their own parts of Protocol Omega. Lieutenant Yujin Kim led her fighter squadron in a series of hit-and-run attacks that struck from unexpected angles. Her pilots would emerge from behind asteroids, launch their missiles, and disappear before the Korthak could respond. This is like fighting shadows, she heard one Korthak commander say over the intercepted communications. The insectoid voice sounded frustrated and confused. That was exactly the point. On the surface of Velthara Prime, Corporal Sunmi Park was teaching the Catherians lessons they had never wanted to learn. The peaceful aliens gathered around her in the crystal tunnels beneath their capital city, their large eyes wide with fear and confusion. I don't understand, said Kale, the young communication officer. Why do we need to learn to fight? Surely the humans will protect us. Sunmi looked at the fragile alien with compassion. His species had never known violence, never understood that sometimes you had to hurt others to protect what you loved. The humans are fighting in space, she explained patiently. But there are Korthak warriors on your planet too. We need to work together to stop them. She showed them how to use the mining equipment as weapons, how to set traps in the crystal tunnels, how to coordinate their movements using hand signals. The Catherians were natural telepaths with each other, but they had never used their abilities for warfare. Think of it as protecting your children, Sunmi suggested. What would you do if someone tried to hurt your families? The concept seemed to click for some of them. Kale straightened up, his translucent skin taking on a harder look. We would do anything, he said quietly. Then let's do anything, Sunmi replied. Above them, the space battle had become something that defied every military textbook in the galaxy. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at the Korthak fleet from impossible angles. The insectoid commanders tried to maintain their perfect formations, but their enemies refused to cooperate. Commander Lee had boarded another Korthak ship with her Marines. This time, instead of trying to capture it, they were using it as a base to attack other vessels. Her people would fight their way to the ship's weapon systems, turn the guns on nearby Korthak vessels, and then escape before their hosts could stop them. This is madness, transmitted one Korthak captain to another. They fight without honor, without proper formation. How are we supposed to respond to chaos? That transmission was intercepted by Dr. Min-Ho Yoon aboard the medical ship Mercy of Seoul. The doctor had been studying Korthak communications since the battle began, and he was starting to understand something important about their enemies. Captain Park, he called over the fleet channel. I think I know why our tactics are working so well. The Korthak aren't just organized, they're biologically organized. They think as a group, not as individuals. Explain, Park's voice came back. They've never faced an enemy that makes individual decisions in the middle of battle. Every move we make is unpredictable because we're not following a central plan. We're improvising and their minds can't handle that level of chaos. Park felt a savage grin cross his face. Then let's give them more chaos than they can handle. The human fleet began implementing even more aggressive tactics. Ships would team up for joint attacks, then split apart to strike different targets. Fighters would coordinate with Marine boarding teams to create maximum confusion. Every human unit was making its own decisions about how to hurt the enemy most effectively. Chief Petty Officer Jae-ho Moon was leading an engineering team that had jury-rigged captured Korthak weapons onto human ships. The alien technology was more advanced, but it was also more complex. Moon's people stripped away the unnecessary parts and turned elegant energy weapons into crude but effective tools of destruction. Their guns are pretty, he reported to his captain, but they're built for precision shooting at long range. We're modifying them for close-range brawling. The modified weapons proved devastatingly effective. Human ships would close to point-blank range and unleash modified Korthak energy. Weapons that had been optimized for raw damage instead of accuracy. Colonel Shin's team had reached the command center of the Korthak flagship. The massive chamber was filled with insectoid creatures working at organic-looking control stations. Everything was connected by flowing lines that pulsed with bioluminescent light. The Korthak hive mind made manifest. "Place the charges," Shin whispered to his team. "Focus on the communication nodes." The explosions, when they came, were small by military standards, but their effect on the Korthak fleet was enormous. Suddenly, the perfect coordination that had made them so dangerous began to break down. Individual ships started making conflicting decisions. Formations fell apart. For the first time in their species' history, the Korthak were experiencing something humans knew well: the fog of war. "Sir," Lieutenant Han called out excitedly, "enemy fleet coordination is breaking down. They're starting to fire on each other." Park watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The Korthak hive mind was fragmenting under the stress of fighting an enemy that refused to be predictable. Individual captains were making decisions that conflicted with the central plan, and the results were chaos. But the battle was far from over. The Korthak still had superior numbers and technology. Even confused and disorganized, they were a deadly enemy. "All ships," Park transmitted, "press the attack. We've got them off balance. Let's keep them that way." Down on Velthara Prime, Kale was learning what it meant to be a warrior. The Korthak ground forces had broken into the tunnel system, and the Catherians had to choose between fighting and dying. With Corporal Park's guidance, they chose to fight. "Remember," Sunmi called out as the insectoid warriors approached their position, "they're stronger than you, but they're not smarter. Use the tunnels. Make them come to you one at a time." The battle in the crystal depths of Velthara Prime was unlike anything the Korthak had faced. The Catherians used their telepathic abilities to coordinate perfect ambushes. They collapsed tunnels to separate enemy forces. They used their knowledge of the crystal formations to create traps that would have been impossible on any other world. For the first time since the invasion began, the Korthak advance was stopped. Above them, the space battle raged on. Human ships continued their chaotic dance of destruction. The Seventh Fleet emerged from quantum space like an avenging angel, bristling with weapons and burning for revenge. Admiral Bo-Ra Choi stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive dreadnought Soul's Hammer, and surveyed the battlefield with cold satisfaction. The Korthak fleet was in chaos. Their perfect formations had dissolved into scattered groups of ships that fired wildly at shadows. Human fighters darted between the larger vessels like angry hornets, while damaged Korthak ships drifted helplessly through space, their crews dead or dying. "Status report," Choi ordered crisply. "Third Fleet is holding position around Velthara Prime," reported her tactical officer. "Enemy fleet cohesion is down to 30%. They're showing signs of panic behavior," Captain Yoonji Ryu transmitted from her carrier Busan Rising. "Admiral, my fighters are reporting something strange. Individual Korthak ships are breaking off from their main fleet. Some are trying to retreat, others are attacking their own allies." Choi nodded grimly. She had seen this before in human conflicts, the moment when an army stopped being an army and became a mob. The Korthak hive mind was cracking under pressure. An individual will was breaking through for the first time in their species' history. "All ships," she transmitted to the combined human fleet, "begin Operation Thunderstrike. Let's finish this." The human ships had spent hours learning Korthak weaknesses, and now they exploited every single one. The insectoid vessels were designed for coordinated fleet actions, not individual combat. Their weapons were precise but slow to target fast-moving enemies. Their armor was strong against energy weapons but vulnerable to kinetic impact. General Dong-Hyun Kim led the ground assault on Velthara Prime from his command ship. His soldiers had been studying the battlefield from orbit, watching how the Catherians fought in their crystal tunnels. What they saw impressed them. "The locals are braver than anyone expected," he reported to Admiral Choi. "They're using their telepathic abilities to coordinate ambushes that would make our special forces proud." On the planet's surface, Corporal Sunmi Park was indeed proud of her alien students. Kale had become a natural leader, organizing the Catherians into teams that struck at Korthak supply lines. Elder Nira used her empathic abilities to sense enemy emotions and predict their movements. Even Administrator Voss had learned to set explosive traps that turned crystal corridors into deadly mazes. The humans taught us something important, Kale said to his fellow Cytherians as they prepared for another ambush. Sometimes to protect what you love, you must be willing to destroy what threatens it. The Korthak warriors in the tunnels were finding themselves hunted by an enemy they couldn't understand. The Cytherians moved through their crystal cities like ghosts, appearing from hidden passages to strike with captured weapons, then vanishing before retaliation could find them. Major Sujin O led her urban warfare specialists into the capital city to support the Cytherian resistance. What she found amazed her. The aliens had turned their peaceful city into a fortress without losing its beauty. Crystal spires had been converted into sniper positions. Underground gardens became ammunition storage. Art galleries were now field hospitals. These people learn fast, she reported to General Kim. Give them another week and they'll be teaching us new tactics. In space, the battle was reaching its climax. Captain Park's Inchon's Fury had taken heavy damage but was still fighting. His ship had become the center of a swirling combat zone where human vessels worked together to destroy much larger Korthak ships. Sir, Lieutenant Han called out, we're detecting a massive energy buildup from the Korthak flagship. I think they're preparing some kind of superweapon. Park studied his tactical display. The enemy flagship was indeed charging something that made his sensors scream warnings. If that weapon fired, it could destroy half the human fleet in a single shot. All ships focus fire on the flagship, he ordered. Everything we have. But the Korthak vessel was too well defended. Smaller ships swarmed around it, sacrificing themselves to protect their command ship. The superweapon continued charging. That was when Colonel Shin made his move. His special operations team had been hiding inside the Korthak flagship for hours, placing charges throughout the ship's vital systems. They had watched the aliens prepare their ultimate weapon, and they had prepared their own response. Fire in the hole, Shin transmitted calmly. The explosions began deep in the ship's core and spread outward like a cancer. Critical systems failed in cascade. The superweapon's energy discharge turned inward, tearing the massive vessel apart from within. The Korthak flagship died in a blaze of green fire that lit up the entire system. With it died the central coordination that had held their fleet together. The remaining Korthak ships scattered like startled insects. Some tried to flee the system, others continued fighting with desperate fury, and a few simply shut down as their crews fell into catatonic shock. Captain Junho Bei led his armored division in the final assault on the Korthak ground forces. His tanks rolled through the crystal cities like ancient knights, their guns blazing as they cleared the streets of enemy warriors. The Cytherians watched in amazement as human military doctrine turned urban warfare into a deadly art form. Armor advance, infantry support, air cover, Bei explained to Kale, who was riding in his command tank. Your people did the hard work of disrupting their formations. Now we clean up what's left. The young Cytherian was learning to appreciate human military thinking. Every move had a purpose, every tactic built on the previous one. It was like watching a deadly dance performed by masters. Dr. Yoon had been monitoring Korthak communications throughout the battle, and what he was hearing fascinated him. Admiral, he reported to Choi, I'm detecting something unprecedented. Individual Korthak soldiers are surrendering. Not their ships, not their units. Individual soldiers are laying down their weapons. This was unheard of in Korthak history. Their species had never developed concepts like individual surrender or personal choice in battle. But the stress of fighting humans had broken something fundamental in their collective consciousness. Some of them are actually asking for asylum, Yoon continued. They want to escape their own fleet. Admiral Choi made a decision that would change galactic politics forever. Grant asylum to any Korthak who surrenders individually. I want to study this phenomenon. The battle for Velthara Prime was winding down, but its implications were just beginning. For the first time in galactic history, a hive mind species had experienced individual consciousness in large numbers. Some Korthak embraced this new awareness, while others retreated into madness rather than face the terrifying freedom of personal choice. The main Korthak fleet was in full retreat, leaving behind nearly 100 damaged or destroyed ships. The few vessels that remained operational fled toward the edge of the system. their crews broadcasting warnings about the chaos bringers from Earth. On the surface of Velthara Prime, the crystal cities sparkled once again in the sunlight. The fires were being extinguished, the rubble was being cleared, and the Catherians were learning to live with the knowledge that sometimes peace must be defended with violence. Elder Nira stood with Corporal Park in the main plaza of the capital city, watching human soldiers help Catherians rebuild their damaged homes. "Your people have given us a gift," she said softly. "Not just our freedom, but the knowledge that we are stronger than we believed." Sunmi smiled. "You were always strong. You just needed to learn how to use that strength." Kale approached them, wearing a makeshift uniform that combined Catherian crystal weaving with human military design. "Corporal Park," he said formally, "I would like to request permission to study at your military academy. I want to learn more about defending the innocent." "I think that can be arranged," Sunmi replied. "But remember, the goal isn't to become warriors. The goal is to never need warriors again." In space, the human fleet was regrouping and assessing damage. They had lost 11 ships and nearly 3,000 personnel, but they had achieved something remarkable. They had defeated an enemy that outnumbered them 6-1. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that humans could be trusted to defend the innocent, even at great cost to themselves. Admiral Choi received a transmission from Earth High Command. "Outstanding work, Admiral. The Galactic Confederation is requesting an immediate meeting. Apparently they want to discuss formal relations with Earth." Choi looked out at the stars where Korthak ships were still fleeing into the darkness. The galaxy had just learned that humans were not the savage Deathworlders they had imagined. They were something far more dangerous. Deathworlders with a conscience. "Tell the Confederation we'll be happy to talk," she replied. "But they come to us, and they come with respect." The age of human isolation was ending. The age of human protection had begun. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Velthara Prime, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Admiral Woojin Park, former captain of the Incheon's Fury, stood on the observation deck of the new Terran-Catherian Joint Command Station, orbiting the peaceful world below. The station itself was a marvel of combined engineering. Human military efficiency merged with Catherian crystal technology to create something that was both beautiful and deadly. Its flowing crystal corridors housed the most advanced weapon systems in known space, while its command centers coordinated defense fleets that protected dozens of worlds. "Sir," came a familiar voice behind him, "we're receiving another distress signal." Park turned to see Commander Kale approaching with a datapad in his hands. The young Catherian wore the uniform of the Galactic Defense Force with pride, his translucent skin bearing the scars of battles fought alongside human warriors. He had been the first alien to graduate from the Terran Military Academy, and his tactical innovations had already saved countless lives. "Where this time?" Park asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "The Drexel system," Kale replied, "a peaceful mining colony. They're under attack by raiders calling themselves the Iron Fang Brotherhood. The local authorities are requesting immediate assistance." Park nodded and activated the station's communication system. "All ships, this is Admiral Park. We have a Code 7 situation in the Drexel system. Prepare for immediate deployment." Across the station, alarms began to sound. Not the harsh klaxons of human warships, but the melodic chimes that the Catherians preferred. The compromise was typical of how the two species had learned to work together, blending human efficiency with alien aesthetics. The fleet that assembled in response to the alert was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Sleek Catherian vessels with their crystal hulls flew in formation with angular human dreadnoughts. The ships were crewed by mixed teams that combined human aggression with Catherian empathy, creating a fighting force that was both tactically brilliant and morally centered. Captain So-Young Lee, now commanding the cruiser Harmony's Edge, reported her readiness. "Admiral, my crew is standing by. Both human and Catherian Marines are eager to show these raiders what happens when they threaten innocent civilians." Dr. Min-Ho Yoon, who had become the galaxy's leading expert on interspecies psychology, transmitted from his research vessel. "Sir, I've been studying the Iron Fang Brotherhood. They're a mixed species group that formed after the Korthak defeat. Apparently some beings were inspired by Korthak aggression, but lack their coordination. They should be easier to handle than our previous enemies." Park smiled grimly. The defeat of the Korthak had sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Some species had been inspired to become more aggressive, while others had sought human protection. The result was a complex web of alliances and conflicts that kept the Defense Force busy. Ambassador Haewon Cho transmitted from the diplomatic vessel Seoul's Promise. "Admiral, I've been in contact with the Drexel government. They're a peaceful species called the Vorthak, herbivorous traders who have never known warfare. They're terrified but willing to cooperate with our rescue efforts." "Understood," Park replied. "What's our tactical situation?" Commander Kale consulted his displays. 27 raider ships of various configurations. They're using hit-and-run tactics against the mining platforms. No military targets, just civilian infrastructure. Classic piracy pattern. General Ki-Young Lee, who commanded the Joint Ground Forces, added his assessment. "If we move fast, we can reach them before they finish looting the primary mining station. My people are ready for deployment." Park looked out at the fleet assembling around the command station. Human ships bristled with weapons designed for close combat, while Catherian vessels carried shield generators and medical facilities. The combination had proven devastatingly effective against enemies who expected either pure aggression or pure pacifism. "All ships, begin quantum jump sequence," Park ordered. "Let's go remind the galaxy why piracy is a bad career choice." The fleet vanished into quantum space, leaving only empty space and the distant stars to mark their passage. On the command station, Elder Nira watched the fleet depart with mixed emotions. The elderly Catherian had become one of the most respected voices in galactic politics, serving as liaison between her people and the growing number of species that sought human protection. "They grow more confident with each mission," she observed to Chaplain Mi Kyung-nam, who had become an unlikely friend over the years. "Confidence born from experience," the human replied. "They know they can win, but more importantly, they know why they fight." "That makes all the difference," Nira nodded. The humans had taught her people that violence was not inherently evil. It was a tool that could be used for good or ill, depending on the intentions of those who wielded it. The distinction had been difficult for her empathic species to understand, but they had learned. In the Drexel system, the Iron Fang Brotherhood was discovering that raiding peaceful colonies was no longer the easy profit it had once been. Their leader, a scarred Vulcani warrior named Grex, watched his sensors with growing alarm as the unknown fleet dropped out of quantum space. "Who are they?" demanded his second-in-command. "The Drexel don't have a military." "Unknown configuration," Grex replied, studying the tactical displays. "Some of those ships look human, but others are different. Beautiful, almost." One of his subordinates laughed harshly. "Beautiful ships? What kind of threat could they be?" The laughter died as the unknown fleet opened communications on all frequencies. Admiral Park's face appeared on screens throughout the raider fleet, his expression calm but his eyes hard as steel. "Attention Iron Fang Brotherhood vessels," Park said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "You are attacking a peaceful colony under the protection of the Galactic Defense Force. You have one opportunity to surrender and face trial, or you can resist and face the consequences. Choose wisely." Grex snarled and cut the transmission. "Surrender? To some alliance of humans and crystal builders? Attack formation! Show them what real warriors can do." The Iron Fang ships accelerated toward the Defense Force fleet, their weapons charging for battle. They were confident in their superior numbers and their reputation for ruthless efficiency. They had no idea what they were facing. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. The human ships used tactics that had been refined through dozens of similar engagements, striking with precision and overwhelming force. But it was the Catherian vessels that proved the real surprise. Their crystal hulls could absorb and redirect energy weapons, turning the raiders' own firepower against them. Their empathic crews could predict enemy movements by sensing the emotions of their opponents. Captain Lee's Marines boarded 3 raider ships simultaneously, using Catherian teleportation technology to appear directly in enemy command centers. The combination of human training and alien technology proved unstoppable. Commander Kale commanded a squadron of mixed human Catherian ships that herded the fleeing raiders like wolves hunting sheep. His tactical innovations, combining human aggression with Catherian intuition, had become the standard throughout the Defense Force. When the smoke cleared, 15 raider ships had been destroyed, and 12 had surrendered. The survivors would face trial in galactic courts that had been reformed to accommodate both human concepts of justice and alien ideas of rehabilitation. Grex himself, was captured alive, brought before Admiral Park in the command center of his flagship. The Vulcani warrior glared at his captors with defiant hatred. "You think you've won something?" he snarled. "There are dozens of groups like mine, hundreds. You can't protect everyone." Park studied the alien pirate with calm eyes. "You're right," he said quietly. "We can't protect everyone. But we can try. And every time someone like you attacks innocent people, we'll be there to stop you. Eventually you'll learn that piracy doesn't pay anymore." "And if we don't learn?" Grex demanded. Park's smile was cold as space. "Then you'll discover why the galaxy calls us Deathworlders." As the Defense Force fleet prepared to return to base, Admiral Park received a transmission from Earth High Command. The message was brief but significant. Another species had requested human protection, bringing the total number of allied worlds to 47. "Sir," Commander Kale said as they reviewed the new alliance proposal, "do you think we're doing the right thing, taking on so much responsibility for the galaxy's security?" Park looked out at the stars, where somewhere among them peaceful beings were sleeping safely, because human ships stood guard in the darkness. "I think about something Elder Nira told me once," he replied. "She said that strength without compassion is mere brutality, but compassion without strength is mere wishful thinking. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy, Kale. We're trying to make it a place where the innocent can live without fear." The young Catherian nodded thoughtfully. "And if that makes us the galaxy's police force? Then we'd better be damn good police," Park replied. As the fleet returned to Velthura Prime, Admiral Park reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate distress call. Humans were no longer the isolated Deathworlders that the galaxy feared. They had become something new, protectors who combined the strength to fight with the wisdom.